Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and thank you for joining me for part 20 of the Employee Manager, where we're going to show you the most important, unique, and never seen before training, where I'm going to show you how to automatically sync your macro-enabled workbook with anyone in the world in just a few clicks. And it is going to be automatic even without saving the file. So it's going to be an amazing training. I cannot wait to show this to you. So let's get started. All right, thanks again for joining me today. This is going to be one of the best and most unique trainings, as mentioned before, because I'm going to show you how to share your Excel file with anyone in the world. All we need is a shared folder, and they're going to get real-time updates, and that can be a macro-enabled workbook. And I'm going to show you a brand new technique. I've never taught it before, and you've probably never seen it before. And it's actually quite simple to program, quite simple to learn, and it can be used on any type of a workbook. All you need is a simple shared folder such as Dropbox, Google Drive, or Microsoft OneDrive, or anything like that, and automatically your information can be shared. And this is quick, immediate sync. So it's going to be, I've got a huge promise, so I can't wait to show that to you. And basically all it is to do is, if you have different users and different applications, what you can do is you can share those. Once the user logs in, you can share that, so each user will have their own independent application, and it is the data that is shared. For example, I've got two of the same applications, although they have different names, but they are also synced up. So if we're going to add an attachment for this, all we would need is just to add simple attachment here. And once that's added, it's automatically going to be updated. So all we would have to do is click on the other file and click there and go ahead and sync that up. And once we enter and refresh that employee, that's automatically going to be synced up right here. So you can see, and this of course works, now I've got it on just one computer, but of course this works with any type of file using the shared folder. So this can be shared with anybody in the world, and as many people in the world as you want, pretty much. I mean, I'm sure there are some limits, but you could easily share this file with 20 or 30 people at the same time. And I'm going to show you an amazing technique using Dropbox and a synced folder, so that you have a specific folder for every user, and that folder gets automatic syncs up and it deletes it. It's going to be amazing training. I have not shown this before. It's something that I created just for Excel for Freelancers, just for you guys. You guys have been so great in following me. I wanted to make sure to give you the best training, so I've been working hard on this for you, and I'm really excited to show this to you. And one of the features is, or one of the issues in the problems with sharing folders, especially when it comes to attachments, because there's a specific file name and a specific file location for attachments per user. And of course, every user or every different machine has a different file name, a different folder structure. So I'm going to show you exactly how to get around that, and it's very, very simple using the techniques and skills that we're going to show you today. So this training is going to be unique and special, and I can't wait to show that to you. So let's get started. In this particular training, I've got two files, one that's called test, and then another one that's called just regular. So let's close the test out and just go ahead and go into this one, which is our main application file here. And I'll go ahead and zoom that in so you can see that. And so basically what we have here is just our file manager. We've been working on the Employee Manager. And the idea that I want to perform is that anytime I make a change in a data structure, that data gets updated. Now here in the Employee Manager, this is not our location of our data. In fact, most of our data is stored in this list here. So here's the idea. Anytime I make a change to here, I want to take that specific change and I want to save it into a user's folder. Now let's go ahead and take a look in our admin, and we'll go ahead and into our users and settings. And right now we have four different users. So here's what I want to do. I want to create a shared folder, and I want to make sure that shared folder is with all users. So let's go ahead and take a look in my folder. Now I have this called Employee Manager. This should be a shared folder. This is my Dropbox, okay? So the idea is to right click and share that folder. Okay? Share this with every single user. So you'll give them their Dropbox email, and you'll want to make sure that this is shared with every user. So if I have multiple people on this folder, you want to share that with every user using their email. Now, Dropbox has their way, OneDrive has their way, Google Drive has their way. So regardless of the way that they're shared, the critical thing is this. Your specific file for this company must be shared with the users. That's all. That's all you need to do. So it's very simple. You just need to take this main application and share this main application folder with all the users that you want here. So if you've created 10 users, you want to make sure that that folder is shared with all 10 users. So it needs to be shown. So you just continue to add. So for example, I would go ahead and add those users onto these emails and make sure it's the can edit, right? We want to make sure they can edit it. So that is all we do. So we just go ahead and add their emails or create a link and share that so they have access to that folder. That's critical. The second thing that we want to do for each user is this. For each user in the company information, I've made a small change here, a few changes. First of all, you may not want to use workbook sharing. If you don't, you can turn this off. Right? If you don't, then nothing will be shared. And that's an important thing because when we are sharing the folder, a lot of data gets put in. A lot of data gets put in these individual folders. And it's actually on a per cell basis. So for example, Lisa, we'll see there's been a change to admin, right? So, and I'll show you exactly how that works for Fred. And we'll go ahead and I'll delete these files so that you can see it. We can have a nice clean start because Fred's not really a user. And so let's go ahead and delete the files in Lisa's as well so we can get a nice clean start. And so the idea is here, in fact, I've got my folder here for the user. And so the idea is here, and then we got time clock. That's a user too. So we'll go ahead and delete those folders. So here's the idea. Any change that I make on any cell, for example, let's say we're going to change an admin. We want a new leave type. Let's say we want a brand new event type. So let's call it vacation, okay? Now, when we make that change, I want this change to be on every user. And to do that, all I need to do is take this value, and I know it's coming from the admin in F16, and I need to share that file in an actual text file into each of the users other than myself. In myself, we don't have any changes because it's my file. But in Lisa's folder, I want to make sure that that changes. So you'll see F16 here. Now you see F16. Let's take a look at this little file here. Admin, sheet name, location, right? Vacation. So when Lisa pulls up her file, we know exactly what to change. This is the beauty of it. And here's what's amazing with this type of technology. If I were to change that again, let's go ahead and change it again. Let's change this to vacation leave. That automatically gets changed so that there's not multiple. So now when we look at Lisa's and we double click that, we're going to see it's now vacation leave. So that if there's a change to the same cell, it gets updated automatically. So when Lisa pulls up her file, she's going to go through all the changes and make it. So for example, if I make a change to this cell and another person makes the change to the cell, who's ever made the second change is going to take precedence, and that is going to be able to update. Lisa's going to be able to update her file automatically. And the beauty of these text files, they get saved, they get read, and they get replaced automatically and extremely quickly. So let's go ahead and log in Lisa and see how that would work. So we'll just save this file. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a brand new one called Lisa Save. We'll do a save as, and then we can just call it Lisa, just so we know, and so we can see two different files how that would work. Let's go ahead and I'll bring this down a little bit so you can see what's going on here. Okay, so we're going to save one that's called Lisa. Now, of course, you'll have this on different. So now we've got Lisa, and what I want to do is I want to change the login for this one. And so we're going to go ahead and go to the login screen. Let's go ahead and pull it out here, login. And normally I'm going to click login, but the fact is that all that does is change the user here. Normally these columns will be hidden, and if somebody wants to log in, they're going to log in right here. All right, I'll do it the right way. Let's see, Lisa's password in the users and settings is 789. Okay, so let's go ahead and do it the right way instead of just changing the username, but so you can see. All right, we'll log in, and then we'll go Lisa, and then 789. And click OK. And what that's going to do is that's going to change this name to Lisa. Basically, it's going to change. All we're doing is B10. So if you're testing, B10. Okay, so now this file is located with Lisa. And the second thing we have to do, but in this case there's no difference, the second thing we want to do is make sure we know this location. So Lisa, on her machine, she has to find that shared folder. Remember that employee manager that's been shared with her? She's got to locate this. That's important. Click OK. In this case, of course, it's the same. I'm using the same computer. Those are the only two things. Now her file is synced. So now when she makes a change, it's automatically going to get changed with Randy. So let's make a change to, let's go ahead and employee manager. All right, so we can change this to, let's take the position. Let's change her position and call her the owner, okay? And that's it. That's it. All we have to do is just do that. Now, even without saving, I'm not going to save this file. I'm going to pull up the original file, the one with my link, right? And we'll go into the recent, and which is this one here, employee manager. And now we're going to pull up the same employee. I'm going to refresh it, and I'm going to show you just how automatically, even without saving that file, it's going to be synced automatically. So we go back into the employee manager with the one that's been logged in as me, and we just have to refresh. We just have to refresh hers, and now it's automatically owner. You see, I didn't even save her file, so it's automatically synced. And of course, this is going to work with any computer on any location. As long as they're shared in a file, it's automatic. So it's super amazing. It's super, I've never seen this before, and we have used other techniques before where we bring in entire tables, but I found this to be much faster, much quicker, and it's really, because it covers the overlap of data in case there's changes, so it's actually more effective and faster to share data on your macro-enabled workbook with as many people around the world as you want at the same time, even without sharing your files. So I can't wait to show you exactly the details, and I'm going to show you exactly how we did this. So let's close this out. So you can see, we'll go ahead and close out the Lisa file so we don't get confused in too many different files. Okay, so here's the idea. The idea is simple. As I went through, when we make a change to any data, that data gets saved. That cell, that data gets saved on every other user, every other than yourself, because you don't need to save your data in this folder. So for example, if I've got one, these are for time clock entries. These are different, right? And the attachments are different. Those aren't users. So these three are not users. This is the user, Fred, Lisa, Randy, and time clock. Those are all users. Now, changes that I make, I don't want to save in my folder because they're mine. But changes that I make should be stored in Fred's. Lisa's should also have. And so the reason Fred has more files than Lisa's because Fred hasn't logged in and Fred hasn't updated. As soon as Fred logs in and Fred updates, which is automatic, all of these changes are going to be taken care of in his application. So he's going to get his updates automatically. So each file based on the username, so when they log in, and it's really great, here's another great feature. Let's say we add a new user. There's no need to add new files. All it is, it's automatic. So let's go ahead and go back into admin and we'll add another user. So let's call this Barry, okay? So we create another user called Barry, and we go down and we make a change. We can make any change to any file. Let's just go back into the employee manager, and we'll change this status to inactive. Now when we check the folder, we'll see automatically that Barry has been created and he has the change already in his folder. So when that new user is ready to start, he's going to pull that change right up. So it's really, really intuitive, so that automatically the automation gets those folders created per user and then gets all the updates so that any new change, so if we were to change it back to active, Barry in his folder would keep that same change, but now it would be active. So when we pull up the employee list J4, we'll see it's now been changed to active. So this file updates itself automatically, which is a really great feature, so that each user, so that there's not multiple changes to the same cell that they have to go to. And you'll see that it's based on the employee list, not the current cell. So for example, if we change this, let's just say to terminated, and we go ahead and take a look at that file. Let's take a look at the file, employee list J4, text J4, employee list, that is the sheet. J4 is the cell, terminated is the value. So then we bring that into Barry's file. We know exactly what sheet to put it on, we know what cell to put it in, and we know the value to change to. For example, so when we look in the employee list, let's pull up the employee list here, and we look into J4, we will see here, right here, under Barry, for this particular person, it's been terminated. So the original, this is why we separate both the front end here and the back end here. Only the back end database needs to be updated so that we know what to change that to into all the users. So this change gets automatically changed into all users. So we have Barry here, but the same thing for Fred. Fred gets this change here. We have Lisa. Lisa gets this change automatically so that each user. And when each user makes the update, these get deleted. So as soon as they update the file, they get deleted. This keeps the folder clear. It keeps all the updates so they don't update the same thing 2 times. So it's a really, really great feature. I'm super excited to show this to you because it's going to really change the way you use Excel. It's going to change the way you create software. It's going to change the way that you distribute software, and it's going to change the way you use it. And even if you just have a simple table, let's say you don't have the kind of complexity of that, but you just want a simple table and you want to share this table. Maybe you have a few small macros. So for example, we want to change this to street, right? Instead of, even if you have a simple table, this works great. So let's say we want to change the street and you're just working on a simple table and you have this. So that change automatically gets recorded for each user. E4, here it is, Main Street. So now it's been shaded to Main Street. So you see, every change gets recorded, even if you're just working on a simple table. And though when that user pulls up their file, they're going to get it automatically, and I can't wait to show you. Let's show you how we actually did that. First of all, we're focused on a change event. So here's what I want to happen. Any change to a table, right? Not here, not to the employee manager. This is just the front end. But when we change it here, it actually gets changed in the table. So it's the table that I'm focused on here. It's the table change. So we know that there's a change event in Excel. So anytime there's a change, I want to run something. So what do I want to do anytime there's a change? I want to update all the users in all the folders of that change. So let me show you how we did that. First of all, you know that there's a change event. Here's in the VBA, and let's take a look at that. This is the change event, and we're focused on employee list. So let's pull up the employee list, but this is going to be for any table, employee list here. We're going to focus on employee sub worksheet change. Worksheet change is what we're going to be focused on. All right, now let's go through this simple macro, and it is this macro pretty much that gets repeated on every database cell. Database. What are databases? Databases are the lists or the tables where our information gets stored. Employee leave list. This is of course a table. Time clock is not a table. It just allows us to enter it, but time clock list is a table. So for example, time clock list is a table. Let's go ahead and go through some of the sheets just so we can familiarize ourselves with all the sheets. Admin, data is stored here, so this I do want to change on because when we make changes, I want to change this for everybody. Time clock list, that's a table, of course. I want changes. Employee leave list, also a table. Employee weekly schedule list, yes, a table. Employee manager, not a table. I don't want changes. Any changes in this are generally stored in different tables. For example, this would be stored in the attachments table. This would be stored in the employee list. So basically, there's nothing here that I want changes. They're all stored in different databases. So we don't have to worry about this. Employee list, certainly, this is a table. Payroll, not a table, not a table. Nothing here is going to be, no changes here. However, there are many tables related to the payroll that will get updated. So there's no changes here that we want to take effect. Reports, again, nothing here that's going to be changed. We don't need to sync anything because this all pulls data from different tables. Events, again, not a table. Nothing here gets saved. Now, the events list, where this comes from, certainly. So we'll take a look at that. Scheduling, also not a table. This is a front end. This means this pulls data from different parts of the application, from different lists. So there's nothing we need to worry about here because no changes that we take place here are needing to be changed on multiple users. So nothing to worry about it. Payroll item list, certainly. This is a table where we store data, so we want changes here to take place. Again, payroll list, yes, again, a table based on the payroll. Default payroll, also a table, so we want changes. Login, nothing changes here. This is a per user. This is specific to every user. This is different. So we don't want to run any changes here. Okay, nothing here will get saved on a per user. Time clock, again, there's nothing here that gets changes. Every change made here gets stored in the time clock list. Events list, yes. Now this is the original data for our events scheduling. So this is the front end. This is the back end. So for sure changes we want to make here. Again, next up, you see this application is getting quite large. Attachments. This is certainly a table here, all of our attachments. So we do want, but however, these two cells are on a per user basis. This just helps us filter. So when we do attachments, we really want to focus only on changes within the table, not here. So that gives you employee archive, certainly a table. Employee payroll, employee list, certainly a table. Okay, so you've gotten to see which ones are tables, which ones are not tables, and which ones we want to make updates on for every user and which ones we do not. So you're getting a kind of an idea on that. All right, so let's go back into the VBA. So we have our list of sheets. Employee manager, again, not always a table, so we're going to focus on that. Employee list, employee managers here. Employee list, go back into employee list so we can just focus on one at a time. So let's go back into the employee list and let's just take a look at this. And first of all, we're going to focus on worksheet change, as I had mentioned before. Second of all, I want to focus on a specific range. For example, we make changes to this sheet, but they're not all database changes. Let me give you an example. Going into the employee list, let's zoom out a little bit so we're going to be focused on this table. However, we do make changes when we come to advanced filters and things like that, so I really don't want to focus on that. I really only want to focus on the data itself. So we're going to limit this to any changes until AG. There's also one slight limitation with this, and that is we cannot sort. We cannot sort this data, okay? We don't want to sort it. We do want our names sorted, so we can sort the names, but we'll do that off here. So I've created another list where we can sort the data so that when we run our sort, it's based on this list here, which is sorted. But remember, our original data cannot be sorted. That's a big no-no. We don't want to, because we cannot have different users with different locations. So the data must remain in the same order always and cannot change. If we do run a sort, if we do want our names sorted, we just need to do a sort off our database. And here I've got the list off of our database, which we can sort. So keep that in mind as well. So we don't want to do that. All right, let's zoom back out. So now we get an idea of why we want to change only to the specific data. So in this case, our employee list is only located between A4 and G99. So we're only going to focus on changes. If we do make a change, we want to check for a few things. First of all, I don't want the kind of changes. There's a certain kind of changes let's go ahead and focus on this. If other people are making changes and you're syncing, so you're bringing changes from other users into you. Let's say another user made a change to this and then you want to change yours. That's not the kind of that's not the kind of change that I want reported. In other words, information is coming into the table, not going out. So that kind of change, I want to separate those two changes. One change is when you're syncing from other users. The other type of change when you're actually making a change to the database. Two types of changes. One, information is coming in. Two, information is going out. So I want to differentiate between those two changes. One is there's two different macros. So for example, here's called application sync. This is where information is coming in. I'll go over this macro, but when this information comes in, I want to separate that. I'm going to make B1 of sheet 4 true. I want to set the sync to on, so those changes are not sync. In other words, let's say Lisa has made a change to this and she's made it street, right? So I want to change our file, right? But I don't want, when that change makes, I don't want to send that same change to all the other users. In other words, I want to make it one way. So we have to differentiate between those two changes. And we can do that with one simple value change in the admin. So we're going to set the admin. When the sync is running, we're going to change this to true. When the sync is not running, it's going to change it to false. I want to differentiate between when information comes in or information goes out. That's all I want to do. So this one cell helps us. So I want to make sure that if there's a change being made, this must be false. If I'm making a change and I want to send that change to all the other users, this must be false. That's all. If it's true, that means information is coming in. So true or false, that's all we need to focus on here. Let's go back into the employee list where we just were, and we want to make sure that B1 is false, right? That means that the sync is not coming in, the sync is going to be going out. And we also want to make sure that the target is not new. This only works when we change one cell at a time. One cell at a time. That's a very important feature. So if there's a large change to a multiple cells, it's not going to work. But the way we've designed this application is to make one change to one cell at one time. So that's why we can do this, because we're changing one cell at one time. And that's an important part of it, because we need to map that data properly. So one cell at one time. So if the user makes a change to a larger than one cell, it's not going to be included in here. So keep that in mind. That's a limitation, but with good design, you have nothing to worry about. It'll always sync just one cell at a time. And we want to make sure J17 is on. What is on? On, of course, we want to make sure that the folder sharing, that the user, if they're just using it on one computer, then we don't need to do any kind of syncing, right? We don't want to sync. If J17, if the workbook sharing mode is off, we don't need to worry about it. But if it's on, we do. So if you're just using this on one computer, you're going to set this to off, and then nothing is going to be created. It's going to be very simple. But if you do share it to on, then we want to make sure that, so this does need to be on. And of course it says, important note, for workbook syncing, the main application must be in a Dropbox, OneDrive, Google, or sync folder with all the users. That's all. All users must be connected. And we did go over that, but that's just an important note. All right, so back into the employee list, so we want to make sure that J17 on, and of course one more additional, we want to make sure that there is an actual folder in the application folder. We want to make sure that the application folder, that's a named range connected to the admin here. We want to make sure this is not blank. This is called the application folder. And we want to make sure it's not blank. We want to make sure it's accurate. Okay, so not blank, because that's where we're going to save it. So that's also a caveat we need to make sure. And if all those conditions are true, that means this is not blank, that sharing is on, that the user has made change to just one single cell, and of course NB1 is false. If all those are true, then we can do the following. We need to know what the user row is, so we're going to dimension the user row as long, the last user row as long. Why do we need to last user row? Because I need to run through all the users, and I need to make this change for all of the users. So I need to run starting here in 308 all the way down to the last user. I need to run through that, and then the last user in this case is going to be Barry. Now I've set the last user row here, and I've used it in this case. I'm going to use Excel formula for last user, because if this is hidden, for example, let's say it's hidden, it's going to have trouble locating the last row when it's hidden. So we've used a formula, and I'm going to pull it right from here, called the last user rows and name range, and of course it's B309. So we're going to use that to last. And the reason we use this instead of NLXL doesn't work very well when it's hidden. If, for example, it's hidden now, it's not going to be able to find that last row very well when it's hidden. So we use the formula, which will work just fine. So that's all we're going to do is count it. And you just want to make sure that you don't want to put a user here, a user here, a user here. We want no blank spaces. So that's important. No empty rows, keeping our users together. All right, so we're going to run through every user. And basically what we're going to say is, if the user is not the current user, then add that change to their folder. So for example, I am the current user, so it's going to skip me. We don't need to add any changes to my folder because I'm the one making the changes. But I do do need to add that change to Fred, to Lisa, to the time clock, and to Barry. So I need to add that change to all those. So we need to loop through those, and it does it very quickly. So we've got the user. We need to know the username and the file name. And of course, we need to create an FSO. That's the file system object. We're going to be using that file system object. And the file, we're going to create a file. It's that little text file. This little text file is going to be used for the file system object, and we're going to create that little text file. And of course, we need to name that based on the sheet name and based on the cell. That's important so that it gets replaced. So we're going to create a file system object in late binding so that you don't need to add any reference libraries here under the references. No need to add those references. Just make sure we have the forms object library. That's important. And we need that. So that's important. We'll need both the objects. So make sure you have those in your references. If there's an error, maybe you'll need to locate that object library in your list here. Okay, so keep that in mind. But normally they're always there. All right, the username, what's the username? That's going to be the application username in sheet 14. Sheet 14, that is our login sheet. If you go ahead and look here, login, and it's a defined name, right? We've defined the name under app user name. So let's look at that in the login sheet. Here, B10 is the named range app user name. So we can pull that from B10 using the named range. That's important. We need to know the current user. And back into the VBA. All right, the app username, so it's the current username, and we also need to know the last user row, and of course that's the named range I just showed you, last user row in sheet 4, which is the admin. So the first user is going to be 308, and we're going to go all the way to the last user. So we're going to loop through every user, and we want to make sure that we're going to set that for every single user. So we need to run that. The first thing we need to do is we need to check if we've added a new user, we need to make sure that there's a folder for that user, and this does it. So what this is going to say is sheet 4 application folder. We know that that's the main folder, and sheet 4E in the user row. What is sheet 4 in the user row? That is the username. Column E, we're going to loop, we're going from one to the next, to the next, to the next, and we're going to check E. This is going to be our username. So this is the folder name. Also, the folder name and the username are going to be the same. So we need to run through this. So we're going to check if there's no folder name, E309, if there's no folder, then create it. That's what I want to do with that line of code. If the directory of sheet 4, the application folder, and the username equals blank, then create it. We can do that with just this line of code. Then the file system object, create folder. What are we going to create a folder? We're going to create it inside the application, and we're going to use the username, which is right here. So basically create a folder for that user if it's not been created. Okay. Next up, the file name. We need to set the file name. What is the file name? That's very important. File name is going to be the sheet 4 with the application folder plus the user name and the target worksheet name. The target worksheet. Remember, not the active worksheet, right? If we're making a change on the employee manager, let's say we make a change here. We don't want it. We don't want the sheet. The sheet is employee manager, right? We don't want that sheet because that's not the sheet that made the name. The sheet that's actually that we're focused on is the employee list. So this is the sheet name. So target sheet name is going to get us the name of the target, the chain where the changes were actually made, and that is important. So in the code, we need the target worksheet name and the target address. I need to know the target address and txt. That's going to be our file name. So we have here, in this case, let's take a look. We're on employee list. In this case, employee list, this is our target sheet name. This is our target address, J4, and this is the txt. This is the type of file. So we're going to build that name based on those three components, the sheet name, address of where it was changed, and then of course we're adding the txt. So that's going to set our name. So now we can set the name. Now that we've got our file name, now we can create a file, we can create a text file, create text file based on the file name. All right, now this one line will create a text file, but at this point the file is blank. So now I need to add the information. So it's blank, but I need to add, what information do I want to add? Well, I want to add, again, I want to add the sheet name, I want to add the cell, and I want to separate that by a comma. That's very important so that I know which is the difference when the sheet ends and when the cell starts. Then I want to separate by a colon, and I want that value, the actual value of the change. So separating that using different characters is going to help us parse this when we want to sync it back in. So we've done that with this line of code. Write the line. We're going to write this line to our bank file. What are the target worksheet name? We're going to use that worksheet just again, the same one we used for naming it, and the comma, and the target address. What is the address of the cell we're changing, and the colon, and then the value. What is the value of that change? Even if it's blank, we need to know. That's it. That's all we need to do. And then we're going to close that file. We're going to close it. Next user, then we're going to go to the next user. So we're going to do this for all the users. I do need to write in one more line of code here. I don't want this to write it for a current, so we're going to write it to if the current user is not. Basically, we don't need to do this for the current user. And I do need to add that line of code in here, but it's just something to make it a little bit faster because we don't need to do those changes. All right, so that's it. So we run through every user and we add that file to every folder. So when we make a list to employee list, Lisa, it gets added in there. When we make the change to Barry, it gets added in there. And it does it all very, very quickly. Lisa, also, again, Barry. So for each file, each time we, and as well for time clock, and let's sort it by date modified so that our newest changes are all the way up here. So this change gets for every user. So when they log in, they can look through their changes and we can sync it. Now let's go over that. Let's look, how do we, okay, so we know how the changes, we know how any change we made. So this gets added to every single sheet that is a database. Login is not a database. Report is not a database. Payroll is not a database. Employee payroll default items, employee payroll default items is a database. So again, we have added that here. Again, but the only difference is the range. We need to know the range of the table because I don't want it for any change, just the range of the table. So this same file gets automatically added. So every time we make a change, that change gets uploaded. Payroll list also, but different range. So anytime we have a list or a table, this is. But if we do have login, of course it's not because login doesn't save any data. So there's no reason to put that on there. So now you see exactly how changes get automatically uploaded into the folder, okay? So the next step, now how do we get the information back into? Well, we can use just a single macro called application sync. Now this is called application sync or update local. Update local, I've created a macro on that. And what I've done, the only question is when do we want it to run? What I have done is when every time we activate a sheet, we can update local. You may also want to add this, of course, to when your workbook opens, you probably want to add it. I've commented it out, but when you're ready to go and you've got a full application, uncomment this out. And that's going to run this sync every time the workbook is open. I've also run it on different ways. You can run it on selection change. For example, let's take a look at the employee manager and on selection change. What I'd like to do is I want to run this when we just select an employee. I'd also like to run it when we select, for example, let's go to employee manager. When I select F2, I want to run it just because, I want to run it a lot of different times because let's say the user has not changed sheets, right? They have not changed the sheets, but they've kept the sheet on and on and on, right? I still want it to sync. So I've added it to F. When you select F2, then run that macro. So I've done that right here under, let's say F2 right here. If not intersection target, F2 is nothing then update local. This is on selection change. So that means when the user selects, and if there's nothing to update, it's very quick. It just runs through, it looks through your folder. All it's going to do when it runs it, it's going to look through my personal folder here. If there's any changes here, any text files, it's going to make those updates. If there's nothing, nothing's going to run. So it's very quick. If there's nothing to do, it's not going to delay your program. If there's a lot of changes, it might, delay it a little bit, but not too much. It's still pretty quick. So that is how we do that. All right, so let's go into, that's when we do it. That's when we make those changes. But let's see what happens. Go back into our application sync. And basically the idea is all I really need to do is I want to run through my folder. Let's go ahead and look at another folder. I want to run through for every file in this folder. I want to take it. I want to open it. I want to take the sheet. I want to take the cell and I want to change the value. Then what I want to do is I want to delete this. Once we're done, I want to delete it. I don't need to keep this file, we can delete it. You could actually put it in an archive folder, but it might take long. But you could keep those changes in some kind of an archive folder so that you could see all the changes by all users. That might be helpful if it's not a big delay on the software, if it doesn't take too long or it doesn't slow down the system. You could definitely do that. All right, so that's what I want to do, and we can do this with just this little small macro. It's not a lot. The first thing we want to define the file name and the file path as a string, and I want the long file name, and we're going to create objects, the file system objects and the file, just as we did before. And then we'll use a TC file. This is going to be our text file, string sync text. So we're going to define some strings all the way along here. I need to know the sheet name. Let's go ahead and finish this as string, and of course this as string also. And the cell value we can use as string also. Okay, so now we've got all that information. So the first thing what I want to do is I want to make sure that the sharing mode is on. There's nothing, if the sharing mode is off, we went over that. If it's not on, then just exit the sub. There's nothing, we don't want to run this macro anymore if they're not on the sharing. So sharing mode has to be on. Okay, so that's important. Next up, we're going to create a file system object using the scripting. We went over this earlier. And I want to determine the user name. The username is the current user name in our login screen. We went over this. So we want to check that. And next, I want to run a macro called check main folder. This is going to do a few things. This is going to be very helpful. If it's wrong, it's going to tell me right away that something is wrong, and this is important. Let's go ahead and look at that. Check main folder, I have that under, I think, admin macros here. Check main folder here. Check main application folder. What it's going to do is going to check if there's some issue with it, then it's going to say, please browse. And that's really important. When a new user logs in, they need to, if there's something wrong with that directory, it's not working, it's going to prompt them, which is really helpful instead of creating an error. For example, let's go ahead and go into the company information. Let's put something incorrect information in here. Okay, so it's incorrect. So now, as soon as we try to run that sync, it's going to say, please set correct application folder where the attachments folder. So right away it says, hey, something's wrong. We need to set up. So let's browse for the right one. And our application folder is called Employee Manager, and that's going to be it. Now it's set. Now when we try to run a sync, it's going to work just fine by switching sheets. So it does prompt us. So we need to run that macro just to make sure. And that macro is simply this: if the directory of our application folder, which of course is in sheet 4, is blank, then do what? Activate sheet 4, click D4. Why are we selecting D4? Well, that's our first tab right here. Let's say we're on this one, right? I want to send the user to the main section, but I want to click D4. D4 is going to select that first tab, and I want to direct them right to here. I want to direct the user exactly what to do, where to do it. And in that case, we're going to select J16, and then we're going to run this macro. What is that macro? We click assign macro. We'll see that that macro is called browse main application folder. So that's the macro I want the prompt user to run. I want to run that macro so the user can properly select their actual application folder. So we do that with that. So continuing on the macro, sheet JS, after we've selected D4, sheet JS, we can select that. And then we're going to run message box. Just tell the user, please correct the application folder. And then we're going to run that same macro that I showed you, browse. And that's just going to browse this application folder. And of course, it's going to set the select items. It's going to select that long file name in this field right here, named range application folder. All right, so that's all that does. So we do run that. We do every time we sync. We want to make sure we run that so we can do check main. We're going to run just to check to make sure it's correct. Now we know it's correct. If it's still incorrect, we should exit the sub, right? If even after they went through this, we're going to run a second check. If something's still wrong, just exit. We can't continue on if they have a wrong path, right? So we've instructed them to do the right thing. If they don't do the right thing, then we're going to exit the sub. So this is kind of a second check, which is nice. Now we know, beyond this, we know we've got a good path, a good correct, so we can continue. The file path, we're going to set the file path to whatever this is, the value of this, plus the username, right? Because that's going to be the path, right? The username, we need to set that up. In this case, that path is going to be this, the employee manager, right here. Here's our application path, plus the / plus Barry. So we need to set this path right here. All right, so we can set that right up here. So we're setting the file path. Next up, I want to double check. I want to make sure that the username has actually exists. If this is a new user, we're going to have a problem. So we're checking that right here. If the directory of the file path does not equals blank, then create a folder and exit the sub. So we need to create that folder, and we're going to exit the sub. Just see if it's a new user creating the folder, and we don't need to move on. Okay, so it's a new user, but it creates that new user folder right here using create folder and the file path. All right, next up, so it's not a new user, we can continue on. We're going to set B1 to true. Remember we went over that. I want to know, as soon as we start syncing, as soon as we start bringing in the data, we're going to set B1 to true. And what this is going to do is make sure that the changes that you make, those changes that you make as we sync, as the information comes in, I don't want those types of changes to be sent out to all the other users. Otherwise, we're going to create a lot of additional work that's unnecessary. So those types of changes are incoming changes. We don't want to send that type of information out. So we're going to set B1 to true, and then of course before we're finished, we set it to false. All right. So then we set we're going to set the file name to directory, and we're going to use the asterisk, the wildcard. That means for every file in that folder that ends in txt, we're going to do something. That's why we use the do while loop. So we're going to set our initial file name to the first one, and then we're going to continue on. So we want to run this loop for every file that ends in .txt in that folder, in your folder, your specific folder. All right, so we're going to do while the file name is greater than 0. Start the loop, do while there are files in that folder. So what that's going to do is going to create a loop. For every single file in the folder that ends in txt, we're going to do something. So for every one. So let's go ahead and continue on. We're going to set the long file name to the file path and the file name. That's the name of the file. We're going to open it, and then we're going to open for input as number 1. Open that. We're going to open the txt file. Then we're going to set the first line input 1 sync text. That means the first line, we're going to give it this variable, sync text. That is going to be a string variable. And in this case, that sync text is going to be right here, admin, comma, J17, :on. So that is going to be our sync text. So we're going to pull that all up. I'm going to put that in txt. That's all I need. I just need that information. So we're going to pull it up. Then we can close it, right? Once we've got the information here in the sync text, we can close the file. So we can close the file. Next up, I need to parse it. I need to pull the sheet name. I need to pull the cell address, and I need to pull the cell value from that. So to get the sheet name, we're going to go left, right? The left. We're going to use the left of the sync text. And what is the left? We're going to use the comma. The whatever is left of the comma is going to be of the sync text -1, because I don't want to include the comma. I want to exclude the comma. So this is going to give us our sheet name. What it's going to do is going to pull everything from the left right here. -1, which means it's going to go 1 before that, because I don't want the comma, and that's going to pull us our sheet name right here, admin, because I need to know the sheet to make those changes. All right, so next up, the cell address. I need to pull the cell address, and I can use the mid. Mid, of course, when we use the mid, right, we need a few parameters. We need, of course, the string, the starting string. We start as the long and the length. I need to know the start as what number are we starting and the length, how long is it. So the first, we're going to start with the string text, and next I need to know what is the starting point. The starting point, of course, is the comma +1, right? The starting point is wherever the comma is +1. So I want to excluding the comma. So here's the starting point right here. In this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's going to be 6. We're going to start at point 6, and then we're going to continue on. And how long are we going to continue on? Until the colon. So we're using the mid to find that. So we need to know. So to get the mid, so here's our starting point, +1. And what is the length? The length is the total of the string. We're going to locate the colon, wherever this colon is in string, finding the number of characters where that colon is, and we're minusing, subtracting, same wherever we find the comma, -1, again excluding the comma. So basically what that does is this. In the mid, we're going to find this wherever this is, and we're going to find the colon in numbers, and we're going to subtract so that we just extract $J $17. We're going to extract that. That's all I want is the mid, using the mid. So that's how we do that on the mid. All right, next up, we've got the cell address. Now I need the cell value, and we can use right of what? The sync text, and again, the length of the whole text, minus the location of the colon. So in that case, we're going to pull up the entire colon here. Let's go ahead and pull it up. The entire text minus whatever location this is. Whatever location this is going to get us our cell value right here. So we can do the length of the entire minus wherever this is found is going to get us our cell value. And so now we have our cell value. Now we have all three components. We have our, let's go ahead and pull this up here. We have our sheet name. We have our cell address. We have our cell value. That's all we need. Now we're ready. Now we can make that change with just one line of code. This workbook, sheets, we know the sheet name, range, cell address, and the value, cell value. That's all we need to do. Now all we can do is we can delete the text file. Again, if you want to keep a record, you could move this file. It might take a little longer, but you can move this to an archive folder if you want to keep a record, although it could be a lot, so I'm not sure if you want to do that. But for our purposes, we're just going to kill. It means delete that file, and then we're going to clear out the file name. I want to clear out the file name because I want to move to the next one. So this line clears out the file name, and then we continue on. We're going to do this for every line. And next up, we're going to do a little bit of cleanup. Once we finish that loop, we're going to set the file system object to nothing and the file name to nothing. And I do want to run an employee sort by name. The reason I've run this is because I want to sort those employees. And remember, now I've changed this. I've changed this particular file because I don't want to sort the entire. So when we go into definition, I've just clicked definition, sort by name. In this case, I've changed this. Before we were sorting the entire, but now all we're doing is what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the values. Let me go ahead and show you what I do because I want to sort that in case we've made changes. I want to resort the list. So employee list. We had this here. We had this list here. This is basically a combination of the first name and last name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this entire list and I'm going to copy it and sort it. And I'm going to sort it here. I'm going to sort it right here. So just sorting this list here. I'm sorting it based on this. This is the unsorted list. This is the sorted list. And then I've created a named range. So if we click on here, named range, that named range is going to be here in employee list. So let's take a look at the formulas. Data validation, we can see that this is the employee list sorted. And let's take a look at that. That's this. So I've updated that to just the sorted list. So we always have a sorted list. So that's very, very important so that we can sort it based on this. So we're not sorting the entire table. We're just sorting the names now so that our list here is always going to be sorted. Okay, so that's important. So I ran that macro, that very quick macro, just in case we make changes to the employee, those employee changes are automatically changed for each and every user. So to do that, we're going to clear the sort fields. We're going to copy over the names from BC, which is our formulas, and we're going to copy them to BB. So first we're going to copy the list over. Next up, we're going to sort, but only BB. We're only sorting that column, the range here, BB4 through BB in the last row. So we're just sorting that specific column and nothing else. So that's very important. So sort by names. And of course, in the end, we're going to set B1 to false. That is how we do it. So that is how we sync changes. Great, so that's exactly how we run through that. Great. There was one additional issue. In fact, it was a big question on our attachments. It said, hey, Randy, well, that's great, but our attachments, right, the problem is we have a linked file. How do we do that for every single user? And I'm going to give you the solution right now. And the idea is, for example, the file path, we can build the file path. So I've made changes in this particular macro. So let's go ahead and take a look in our attachments folder, right? Before we had the long file name. Now all we have in fact, we can reduce this now. All we have, in fact, I should change the name of this to just file name. It's no longer, let me see if I have we'll need to change it both. File name, right? It's no longer the file path. So now it's file name. But remember, when you change a header, you have to change those named ranges too. Make sure you do that. The full path, right? And here the full path, right click and paste those values. Okay, so when we run our advanced filter, we need to make sure those headers are the same. It's now a file name. Why do we only need a file name? We don't need a file path anymore because we can build that file path, because the path of this is going to be simple. For each user, it's going to be different. It's going to be this, plus it's going to be the word attachments. So it's going to be here. Let's take a look at that back into our file. For every user, it's going to be different. Here's our employee. Here's our main file. Then it's going to be attachments. Then it's going to be employee ID. So it's going to be employee ID. So those are going to get changed in the employee ID. So I've made some changes so we can build the path. It's different for every user. That's how multiple users can share the same file and have different paths, but it's all going to link up just perfectly. So we've done that, and let's go ahead and show you the changes that I made in the attachments. So let's take a look at that. In the employee attach here, this is where we've made some changes. So let's show you how we do. The first of all, in this we're going to select file. Nothing has changed here where we select the file. Next, we need to make sure we're going to check for the attachments folder. What I want to do is I want to look in the main application folder, and I want to check for this folder, attachments. If it doesn't exist, then I need to create it. Create a folder called attachments. Create this folder. I need to make sure that this folder exists. That's the first thing I want to do. If it doesn't exist, create it. So that's what we're doing in that line of code. Next up, I need to check for the employee folder. Is there an employee number? And notice we don't put employee names. Employee names change. So we want to make sure employee numbers do not. So in this case, I've created a folder based on the employee number so that never changes. The employee ID never changes. So our folders are based on the employee ID. So that's very, very important. Very important, because we don't want to, before we had it on names, and the names can change and it creates a lot of confusion. You have multiple folders with a slight differentiation, but employee ID will never change. So we want to keep it based on the employee ID. So next up, I need to look, is there an employee ID folder? If not, create it. So we can do that with this line of code. Here, right here, attachments, employee ID. We've defined the employee ID up here. J2, employee ID J2. What is J2? Let's go ahead and look at that. In the employee manager, J2 is where our employee ID is located. So I need to pull that ID when we add those attachments. So that's very important. So we're going to pull the employee ID, and down here what we're going to say is we're going to check, is there a folder called this? The destination folder is going to be the main folder plus the attachments plus the actual employee ID plus the words underscore the text employee ID. So that's what I want to name the folder. So we're going to say, does the destination folder exist? If it's blank, then create it. We can create it. So this just creates the folder for that employee if it does not exist. Okay, so now we know we've got the attachments folder. We've created that if it doesn't exist. We've got an employee folder. We've created that if it doesn't exist. Now what we do is we can create a destination file path, and that's simply the destination folder and the backslash and the file name. Of course, we know the file name is whatever we've browsed for here. Whatever we've browsed for is going to maintain that file name. All right, next up, we're going to copy that original file path into the destination file path. The destination, of course, is right here. Destination file path is here, the destination folder plus the file name. So we've created that. Now we're going to create a copy in that folder. So all that's going to do is take the original file, whatever its location, and it's going to pull it right in here using the original name, but it's going to put it in the employee folder. So we have that, everything separated by employees. All right, next up, we just need to update the file, the sheet 3, the attachments database. Nothing has changed here except the file name, of course, now is simply the name of the file and not the long file path. So then everything else is the same, except there's a few things different. When we display it, we need to build the file name. We need to build that file name. So let's show you how we build that file name. The file path instead of, right, the file path, when we want to display the thumbnails or open it, right, we need to open it using the file path. The file path is going to be the main application folder, the attachments name folder, the employee ID, and the employee ID. In fact, I need to add this to open here too. This I need to update here as well. And the attachments open, I need to make sure, because before before that, I'm going to update this where we build that file name, and I'll do that right up here. I'll do that So we want to make sure that that file path is now these components: the folder name, the main folder. Remember, this will be different for every user, the attachments folder, the employee ID. And so this is going to be the full file path, right? So this is going to be the full file path. And that's how we do it. Then once we have the path, we can then insert this attachment. And I'll make sure that those updates are made with attachment open as well. So that's got, in other words, to open it. Before this was the full file path, but now we need to build the file path. So I'll make sure we update that when you get the application. All right, so that is how we do it. That's how we update the file path when we build the link. So we don't want to include a file path in there because it's going to be different for every user. So for each user, we build the path. That's all that's important. In this way, we can, regardless of the user, we can then display those thumbnails properly just by clicking here because we're building that file path based on the location. All right, great. I'm so glad we got to that. In this particular training, we covered how to create a main application folder, how to share those changes with multiple users using an amazing TXT file that's extremely fast, and creating those TXT files and then updating the local machine regardless of where they are in the world, as long as they all have the same application folder. And we've created a workbook sharing mode both on and off, so that's been great. We've showed you how to sync those files using a sync application here in the application sync, so we can sync those files regardless, and how to update that. And of course, we have also showed you how to take changes from any particular worksheet and then create changes for every user in a TXT file automatically in those users folder. So we've got a lot covered. We've done an amazing job at creating a shareable macro enabled workbook that you can share with as many people in the world as often as you want, even without saving the application. So it's really an amazing feature, and I can't wait to see how you execute this in your applications. Of course, thanks so much. Please share this video and share the application. Also comment below. I'd love to hear your comments. And of course, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't. I'll include the links below. And if you haven't yet, please check out the dashboard course. That is how I can make these free videos for you each and every week. So I would love if you check out the dashboard course. For that, of course, I'll include the links in below. It's a 15-hour amazing dashboard course, single-click dashboard. So I hope you get a chance to look at that. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.